Hello students, welcome back to the science class. In this video, you're going to learn about few examples of infectious disease. So without further ado, let's begin our lesson. Before we learn further more about infectious disease, let's talk about antibiotics first. An antibiotic is a drug that kills or stops the growth of the bacteria without harming the cells of the infected organisms. Antibiotics are derived from living organisms, although they are often made more effective by various chemical processes. How antibiotics work. Antibiotics interfere with some aspect of the growth or metabolisms of the target bacterium. These include, first, synthesis of the bacterial cell walls, second, activity of the proteins in the cell surface membrane, third, enzymes action, fourth, DNA synthesis, fifth, protein synthesis. One of the examples of antibiotics is penicillin. Bacterial cells have walls made of peptidoglycans. In a bacterial cell wall, peptidoglycans are held together by cross-links that form between them. Penicillin prevents the synthesis of the cross-link between the peptidoglycan polymers and the cell walls of the bacteria by inhibiting the enzymes that build this cross-link. This explains why penicillin does not affect human cells. Our cells do not have walls. This also explains why penicillins and other antibiotics do not affect viruses, which do not even have cells, let alone cell wall. Antibiotic resistance. Antibiotic resistance happens when the germs like bacteria and fungi develop the ability to defeat the drugs designed to kill them. That means the germs are not killed and continue to grow. There are few reasons why microorganisms can develop antibiotic resistance, like proteins in the membranes of bacteria can inactivate antibiotics so they have no effect. Bacterial membranes have proteins that pump out antibiotics if they enter the cytoplasms, or the antibiotics simply cannot bind to the intended site of action. But one of the main reasons is because of mutation. For example, when someone takes penicillin to treat a bacterial infection, bacteria that are susceptible to penicillin will die. In most cases, if the dose is followed correctly, this will be the entire population of the disease-causing bacteria. However, if the dose is not followed, perhaps because people stop taking the penicillins when they feel better as the symptoms disappear, then some susceptible bacteria survive, and if any mutations occur, this might confer resistance. The next time there is an infection with this strain of bacteria, penicillin may not be effective. There are two ways in which the antibiotic resistance gene can pass in the population of bacteria, which are vertical transmission and horizontal transmission. To make it simple, the difference between these two is vertical transmissions occurs during the binary fission, while the horizontal transmissions occurs during the conjugation. Now, let's talk about few examples of infectious disease. First, cholera. Cholera is a bacterial disease usually spread through contaminated water. Cholera causes severe diarrhea and dehydration. Cholera is caused by the bacterium Vibrio cholerae. As the disease is waterborne, cholera occurs where people do not have access to proper sanitation like clean water supply and uncontaminated food. The features of cholera can be looked at the table here, or you can find the table on your textbook page 201. Treating cholera. Almost all people with cholera who are treated make a quick recovery. The disease can be controlled quite cheaply by a solution of the salts and glucose given intravenously to rehydrate the body. Preventing cholera. To prevent cholera from spreading, there are a few ways you can do, like first, drink only water that you have boiled or treated with chlorine or iodine. Second, eat only foods that have been truly cooked and are still hot, or fruit that have been peeled by yourself. Third, avoid undercooked or raw fish or shellfish. Fourth, make sure all vegetables are cooked. Fifth, avoid foods and beverages from the street vendors. Now, let's talk about the next infectious disease, which is malaria. Malaria is a mosquito-borne infectious disease that affects humans and other animals. Most cases of malaria are caused by one of the 4 species of the Productis plasmodium, whose life cycle is shown here. First, female Anopheles mosquito feed on human blood to obtain the proteins they need to develop their eggs. If the person they bite is infected with the plasmodium, they will take up some of the pathogen's gametes with the blood meal. Second, male and female gametes fuse in the mosquito gut and develop to form infective stages, which move to the mosquito salivary glands. Third, when the mosquito feeds again, she injects an anticoagulant from her salivary glands that prevents the blood meal from clotting, so that it flows out of the host into the mosquito. The infective stages pass from the mosquito's salivary glands into the human's blood together with the anticoagulant in the saliva. Fourth, the parasites enter the red blood cells where they multiply. The parasites or plasmodium has 2 hosts. The sexual stage occurs in the mosquitoes, the asexual stage in humans. The female Anopheles mosquito is therefore a factor of malaria, and she transmits the disease when she passes the infective stages into the uninfected person. A factor is an organism which carries a disease from one person to another or from an animal to a human. Malaria may also be transmitted during the blood transfusion and when unsterile needles are reused. Plasmodium can also pass across the placenta from the mother to the fetus. The features of malaria can be looked at the table here, or you can find the table on your textbook page 202. Treating malaria. Antimalarial drugs such as quinine and chloroquine are used to treat infected people. They are also used as the prophylactic or preventative drugs, stopping an infection occurring if a person is bitten by an infected mosquito. Preventing malaria. There are 3 main ways to control malaria. First, reduce the number of the mosquitoes. Second, avoid being bitten by the mosquitoes. Third, use the drugs to prevent the parasite infecting people. Now, let's talk about the next infectious disease, which is AIDS or acquired immune deficiency syndrome. AIDS is also known as HIV/AIDS or human immunodeficiency virus infections and acquired immunodeficiency syndrome because it's caused by the HIV or human immunodeficiency virus. HIV is a virus that attacks the cells that help the body fight infection, making a person more vulnerable to other infections and diseases. HIV is a retrovirus, which means that its genetic material is RNA, not DNA. Once inside the host cell, the viral RNA is converted back to DNA, hence retro, to be incorporated into human chromosomes. The virus infects and destroys the cells of the body immune system so that their numbers gradually decrease. AIDS is not a disease. It is a collection of these opportunistic diseases associated with immunodeficiency caused by HIV infection. HIV is a virus that is spread by intimate human contact. There's no factor and the virus is unable to survive outside the human body. Transmission is only possible by a direct exchange of the body fluids. The features of HIV or AIDS can be looked at the table here, or you can find the table on your textbook page 206. Treating HIV/AIDS. There is as yet no cure for AIDS and no vaccine for HIV. Preventing HIV/AIDS. The spread of HIV/AIDS is difficult to control. The virus' long latent stage means it can be transmitted by people who are HIV positive but who show no symptoms of AIDS and do not know they are infected. The virus changes its surface proteins, which make it hard for the body immune systems to recognize it. This also makes the development of vaccines very difficult. For the present, public health measures are the only way to stop the spread of HIV. People can be educated about the spread of the infection and encouraged to change their behavior so as to protect themselves and others. Now let's talk about the next infectious disease, which is tuberculosis or TB. Tuberculosis or TB is an infectious disease usually caused by the Mycobacterium tuberculosis (MTB) or Mycobacterium bovis. These are the pathogens that live inside the human cells, particularly in the lungs. This is the first site of infections, but the bacteria can spread throughout the whole body and even infect the bone tissue. TB is spread when infected people with the active form of the illness cough or sneeze, and the bacteria are carried in the air in a tiny droplets of the liquid. Transmission occurs when people who are uninfected inhale the droplets. The features of the tuberculosis can be looked at the table here, or you can find the table on your textbook page 209. Treating tuberculosis. The treatment involves using several drugs to ensure that all the bacteria are killed. The treatment is a long one, 6 to 9 months or longer, because it takes a long time to kill the bacteria, which are slow growing and are not very sensitive to the drug use. Preventing tuberculosis. Contact tracing and the subsequent testing of the contacts for the bacterium are essential parts of controlling TB. The only vaccine available for TB is the BCG vaccine, which is derived from the M. bovis and protects up to 70 to 80% of people who receive it. TB can be transmitted between the cattle and humans. To prevent people catching TB in this way, cattle are routinely tested for TB, and any found to be infected are destroyed. TB bacteria are killed when the milk is pasteurized. These control methods are very effective and have reduced the incidence of the human TB caused by the M. bovis. Now let's talk about the next infectious disease, which is measles. Measles is a highly contagious illness caused by the measles morbillivirus that replicates in the nose and the throat of infected child or adult. There are no symptoms for 8 to 14 days after the initial infections, then a rash appears and a fever develops. Other symptoms are a runny nose, a cough, red and watery eyes, and small white spots that may develop inside the cheeks. Measles is one of the most contagious diseases. When people infected with measles sneeze or cough, they release droplets containing many millions of virus particles. If these are inhaled by uninfected people who have no immunity to the disease, it is almost inevitable that they will become infected and develop symptoms. Treating measles. Treatment involves bed rest and taking medicines to lower the fever. There are no specific medicines for measles. After about 10 days, the disease clears up and there are rarely any complications. If complications do occur, they tend to be serious, like pneumonia, ear and sinus infections, brain damage, and convulsions may follow a measles infection. Preventing measles. Measles can be prevented by vaccinations with measles, mumps, and rubella or MMR vaccine. I think that's all about our lesson today. Don't forget to do the exercise on and water. Bye!